Before we get very far into our next story, we do have a warning for you tonight. What you're about to see and hear may not be suitable for children. Tonight, take a walk in their world.
Transpicuous news, connecting the dots between the lines.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Transpicuous News. It's October 11th, Sunday, 2015. And yet again, it's been an interesting week. Distractions, and all kinds of interesting stuff crawling out of the woodwork this week. So let's just jump right in, because I want to show you, look, our old friend Ebola is back. Come on, you knew it had to come back. This is an awesome article. Apparently, some nurse who had Ebola is now somehow had a relapse and gotten Ebola again. And she's back in hospital. And they make a big deal of saying she's not contagious, and yet they have her in full isolation, which just goes to prove, everyone, now, it's not Ebola. Because Ebola doesn't relapse, ever. No case in history, ever, of anyone having an Ebola relapse. So, there you go, perfectly, there you go, what is it? Lab-created Ebola, Ebola. In Scotland. Oh, I'm telling you, you British people should be so afraid right now. So afraid. We have a few ridiculousnesses to go into. So you remember earlier this summer we talked about the fact there was an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in New York City. Oh my God, right, okay. And we pointed out very strongly, it's not contagious, you can't catch it, you get it from drinking water that is polluted with the bacteria. So 16 people have died in New York from Legionnaire's disease this summer. So the doctor who was treating them went out and went searching to find the cause. He went out testing. Kind of one of those things doctors want to know. What caused all these people to die from this disease? Well, guess what? He just got fired because he went out and tested people's water in their homes. And of the 16 people who died, 6 of them, the water in their home tested positive for Legionnaire's disease. That would be municipal water supply, folks. And if we remember correctly, the news story back in July was, at the time, I think it was about 7 people who had gotten Legionnaire's disease had all come. One thing they had in common was public places like shopping malls and certain restaurants. So there you go. Here you go, another example. Doctor gets fired because he was doing his job and trying to figure out where this disease was coming from. Yay, New York. Now, this is a really important article. I want everyone to pay attention to this one. This is a testing, and I've been following this now for 2 years hard. 2 years ago, this is all about gene patenting, to have companies, biological, biopharm companies, trying to patent human genes, thereby patenting pieces of human anatomy. Okay, so the BRCA1 cancer gene, which is a cancer gene they've isolated, they know that it causes breast cancer. Okay, they tried to push this through. You guys may remember about 2.5 years ago, they tried to push this through in the States. It was all the big thing. Angelina Jolie had her breast taken off because, she tested positive for this. It was all fucking fake. They tried to push this through. They placed a patent. They were awarded the patent, and it was overturned by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, of all frickin' people. He overturned it and said, no, you cannot patent this gene. Well, once they overturned it in the States, it set a precedent. So now they had to go start running off, and they got to test their patents in other places. The next place they went was Australia. Okay, now, Brisbane grandmother Yvonne Darcy celebrates a high court victory in the battle over the BRCA cancer gene patent. And she won against the high courts. So guess what? This patent has now been overturned in Australia as well. Now, I have not looked. I strongly suspect they will pick a country in the EU to try and push this through. They need a major country to allow them to do this patent. And it's a really important one for people to follow, because once this door opens, yes, there's a lot more genes and pieces of your genetic makeup that they want to patent, take away from you and stuff. Now, if you want a great story, this is so awesome. In Canadian Mennonite University in Winnipeg, Canada, they found an ancient gourd, approximately 800 years old. And when they found it and cut it open, it still had seeds inside. They revived the seeds and they grew this pumpkin. This squash, I should say, has been extinct for 800 years. So I'm sorry, I thought this was absolutely phenomenal, and they've grown the squash. They're going to harvest the seeds and regrow because they're trying to reintroduce this breed back in. And so you're talking about seeds that have been untouched by the Industrial Revolution, the pesticides, the herbicides. No meddling here, folks. So I'd be interested in tasting one of those. Now, if you want to now we're going to get into the completely ludicrous. Yes, there's someone who's patented a new product. This is a moon cup. This is known as a menstrual cup for women when they're on their periods. And this one is so special. It will text you to tell you when it's time to empty your cup. Oh yes, it will, because you want your vagina to text you messages. Yeah, no, actually you don't. What's kind of really scary, beyond the complete ludicrousness of, I love how they push this as like, this will make women's lives so much easier. Really? I don't know about you. I'm pretty sure all the other women out there don't really have a problem with needing to know when you need to go change. Oh, call me silly. Yeah, not only that, it tests your blood. It can tell you things like, oh, you're not getting enough sleep, or perhaps you have too much stress in your life. Because you want a device inserted in your vagina that sends like messages to you and records information about your blood. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Talk about fucking insanity. Yeah, testing, 1, 2, 3. No thanks. And here you go for more complete idiocy. Another group has come up with an idea. They're going to use drones and bomb the planet with seed pods. And they actually use the terminology, going to bomb the planet with seed pods. Of course, they don't tell you what seeds they're going to use. Like a little Monsanto, bomb them into other farmers' fields so then they can sue the farmers for, stealing their seeds. Oh, look, the seeds are growing in your field. You didn't pay for them. Now we're going to sue you. Kind of like they have been doing in India. Right. Yeah, no, again, I'm thinking, what's wrong with just planting some seeds in the ground? Do we really need high-tech bombers to bomb the planet with seeds? I don't know. Yes, and I mean, come on. There are those things that get launched and you go, oh, this is so going to go real bad. China, 2 weeks ago, opened its glass walkway. It's like a glass bridge over these horrific precipice. So yeah, 2 weeks it was open and it shattered. I don't know. Sorry, guys, I'm not an engineer, but even I can tell you that you can't do that with glass. Glass doesn't, bend, not even tempered glass. Yeah, so needless to say, I would not have been one of those people walking around on the glass causeway, thousands of feet above the Grand Canyon type place. No. So anyways, yeah, bad idea. Didn't work. Back to the drawing board, I guess. And because, you know, I just so love taking the piss out of the F-35. Well, they've just done a new study. You know, the bajillion-dollar U.S. jet that they just keep pouring money into. They just did a test and discovered that the ejection seat is so powerful that if a person was to actually try and eject out of it, it would break their neck just with the G-forces alone. Oh, so it was that you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You stay in the jet, you crash, you eject, and you break your neck. So yeah, another fail on the F-35. But you know, the Pentagon is really trying to convince you what a good job the F-35 is doing in Iraq, where no one can see it. Right. Yeah, I don't believe it. Okay. And I don't know if you've heard this, because strangely enough, they're kind of keeping this one quiet. You know those EPA guides? You remember like the Yellow River? Was it like in August? And they spilled all the toxins into the river. Guess what? They just did it again. Yeah, they did. It's super special. Standard Mine. Oh, it's another mine. The Crest Butte triggers a waste spill. The Environmental Protection Agency crew working at the Standard Mine above Crested Butte triggered a wastewater spill into the creek that flows into the town water supply. Only 2,000 gallons spilled. Only 2,000. Of course, that was just yesterday, so they may have already upped that to 20,000 by today if we were to look at previous experiences and base our information off previously how they've run these things. So we'll wait and see for some updates. So I personally, because I was looking into this, I was looking around, I was kind of like, you know, the EPA, their logo, so boring. Yeah, they really do need a nice fresh new logo. So I thought I'd help them out. So I just kind of redesigned their logo for them a little bit. I don't know. I'm thinking of sending it in as a candidate and say, hey guys, what do you think? I think you should pay me for redesigning your logo. It could work. I'm going to put this on Facebook, though, so everyone can share it around. That's so much fun. Now, it was a week of interesting stories, and one of those head scratchers. American Airlines has a pilot drops dead while he's flying a plane in the U.S. They have to do an emergency landing, and all that gets released is that his death was due to an illness. Now, first of all, you call a crock of shit right there, because first, pilots are tested for everything, and they don't let you fly if you have even hypertension, let alone, you know, an illness that might cause you to drop dead. So, hiding something perhaps? I don't know. But that was immediately followed 18 hours later by a co-pilot passing out on a United Airlines flight. He did not die, but he did have to be taken away by an emergency, an ambulance, etc., etc. Makes me go, oh, that's very interesting. Not quite sure what they're trying to tell us there, but it's interesting, and I will be continuing to watch, you know, these airlines that keep having all these interesting things happen. So the other big thing, of course, this week, you know, because one school shooting is just not enough. They had to outdo themselves. And I said, look out for the big distractions. No, they didn't have one. 2 university shootings in the same day. 2. Now, I swear, like, you just have to look at these guys and go, Anyways, beyond the fact that it just so happened to happen on the exact same day that Obama was visiting the town in Oregon where the other mass school shooting happened last week, you know, when he was there to give his condolences and push gun confiscation. The two universities, now again, universities again, one was in, so the first one was in Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. Apparently an 18-year-old college student was taken into custody after he shot 4 people, killing one in a confrontation near the residence hall. Turns out it was a frat party. Not really, but that's kind of what it sounds like it was. And then the other one was in Texas Southern University. One person was killed and another wounded in a shooting there. They happened literally within hours of each other. Oh, and 2 high schools had what could have been a shooting. It could have happened. Armed people on the campuses, and they closed them all down and all the rest of it. Now here's the interesting thing, because just before this happened, we got this. Volunteers needed. Joint active shooter law enforcement exercise in Woodland Mall in Houston. When? Sunday, November 8th. November. Okay, Sunday, November 8th is when they're supposed to be doing this. I just want to show you something though. I found it really interesting that Woodlands Mall is just 37 minutes away from Texas Southern University. I don't know. I just find it coincidental that they're that close. Interesting. So let's see. Now, the other interesting thing, didn't get much airtime, kind of got brushed under the carpet. PayPal had a global system outage on Monday night. Every account around the world was affected. Account balances disappeared. Transactions went through but didn't go through. Money was taken out of accounts and yet no transactions were shown. Now, it was all cleaned up by the next day, although there were still ongoing problems. A little bits here and there during the week. Hell, everyone has. I have problems with my PayPal regularly. But like I said, Skype outages, Facebook outages, internet outages. Testing. 1, 2, 3. PayPal. Banking, money. Oh, is another banking money type system that all of a sudden you couldn't get your money out of for a day? Interesting. Keep your eyes peeled, friends. Oh, and what were they distracting everyone from this week? Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal is reached. The United States and 11 other Pacific Rim nations on Monday agreed to the largest regional trade accord in history, a potentially precedent-setting model for global commerce and worker standards that would tie together 40% of the world's economy from Canada to Chile, Japan, and Australia. Now, as I said, I've been warning people about the TPP for a long time. And of course, while it's on the table, information hasn't been released to the public yet, because it has. Little bits and pieces are leaking out. Zero Hedge Trans-Pacific Partnership deal struck as the corporate secrecy wins again. Once again, the corporatocracy wins the so-called Trojan horse. The Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement has been finalized as they set commercial rules of the road for 2/5 of the global economy. Interesting pieces coming out. So WikiLeaks released an entire chapter about intellectual property, and I strongly recommend you go take a look. Here's the interesting part of this. The leaked documents are dated October 5th, the same day the 12 participating nations, including the United States, Mexico, Canada, Japan, and Vietnam, announced a deal had been struck in secret between trade negotiators. The full text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership will not be released to the public until after October 19th. Oh, when is the Canadian elections? Oh, just before that. So Canadians have zero chance to use the TPP as a basis for how they vote in this on the coming election next week. Zero. Isn't that sweet? Yeah, let's not even get involved in that one. Okay, so now a couple of the interesting things that are coming out. The biggest global threats to the internet agreed as campaigners warn that the secret pact could bring huge new restrictions to the internet. I'm going to point out, this is mainstream media in London, England. An agreement that some campaigners have called the biggest global threat to the internet has just been signed, potentially bringing huge new restrictions on what people can do with their computers. One particularly controversial part out of the provisions make it a crime to reveal corporate wrongdoing through a computer system. Experts have pointed out that the wording is very vague and could lead to whistleblowers being penalized for sharing important information and leading to journalists stopping reporting on them, because journalists could also be charged. That would be me telling you about what's going on. Isn't that special? So that's hidden in your TPP. Yeah. Yeah, guys. Not cool. Now, here's the interesting thing. Well, I'll give you this little article first. Will China join forces against the TPP? The newly signed controversial Trans-Pacific Partnership sounds like a big win for the US and its allies, but leaving out China. Now, here's the thing. The former director of the South American Trade Bloc said China is the main victim of TPP. He says the main victim is China because in order to sell to other TPP members, the country needs to have created goods with its raw material or input. The countries will therefore not buy raw materials from China as they would want to sell goods to the US and other countries. It is clear that the aim is to generate trade division towards those who are members and to remove China, who is not a member. Now, when you take into consideration everything that's been going on with China recently, but more importantly, even the last couple of months, this takes on a very interesting meaning. Now, what's hysterically funny, and I don't know if it's a matter of, politicians just lie. It's like they're all compulsive liars. They can't seem to help themselves, or if they're just that fucking stupid. China's little noted rage against the TPP, free trade, as US demagogues and presidential candidates bluster against the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact as a boon to China, the very same China, in a far colder fury, is sharpening its claws to kill it. So you have all these American guys who are going on and on and on about how this is going to help China when China's not even involved. As a matter of fact, things could get real ugly. Then again, what's China doing right now? China is gathering up their own trade partners, aren't they? Is China about to make its own little trade pact with a bunch of other nations and just do it itself? Could be very interesting because, let's face it, they're like 90% there anyway. So interesting things this week about China. Financially, the yuan overtook the yen as the fourth most used payment currency. Now this is major, major, major. And while it gets kind of mentioned, just, in passing, the importance of what's happening here is not really being talked about by the mainstream media, especially in the States. China's yuan overtook Japan's yen to become the fourth most used currency for global payments, shrugging off a surprise devaluation to rise to its highest ranking ever and boosting its claim for reserve status. The report comes as the IMF prepares to conduct a twice-a-decade review of the SDR, the Special Rights Drawing Basket, which currently comprises of the US dollar, the euro, the British pound, and the yen. Interesting, because of course this has been one of the big arguments that we've watched. If you're following the financial shit, especially for the last 5 months, the whole SDR, is the yuan going to get put in, isn't it, etc. US saying no, or it's not going to happen, etc. It's kind of interesting. This week, China also launched its CIPS international payment system. This will allow the China international payment system will allow increasing efficiency in cross-border settlement in yuans and encourage the yuan's use globally. The deputy governor of the Central Bank of the People's Bank of China has told the ceremony in Shanghai the establishment of CIPS will allow increasing efficiency in cross-border settlement in yuans. It will be seen as China's alternative to SWIFT. Now, SWIFT payment system is kind of taking a hit at the moment. And China is now setting up its own bank transfer system like this, dealing totally in yuans, bypassing the American dollar that much more. Oh, China's dumping more US government debt. Not just China. Russia, by July of this year, Russia had sold $32.8 billion in US Treasury debt. Brazil and Taiwan have been dumping the dollar as well. All of these countries used to be America's biggest customers. Times they are changing. It's getting real interesting. Oh, now, the TPP isn't the only one. You've also got the TTIP, which is the America's trade negotiations going on with Europe and Canada. This is the one that Harper's been trying to keep secret from Canadians for years. Literally years. They've been under negotiation on this. As a threat to democracy, 3 million Europeans signed a petition against the TTIP. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of people in Europe really, really angry about this. If you remember, right before one of the G20 meeting that was happening, or financial meeting that was happening in Brussels, in Belgium, and the Belgian town that was actually holding the meeting said that if you pass the TTIP, we're not playing. Berlin, Germany yesterday. The German people, yeah, they're not very happy. They're kind of pissed. Berlin, mainstream media saying over 250,000 people showed up to march against the TTIP. This is a bad one, folks. This one I have been looking up a lot because it really, really directly affects Canada, back when I was still living in Canada. And like the TTP, or TPP, whatever, this is the corporatization. This is it. So one might say, how much screaming have you done today about being sold out to corporations? I mean, not that we're all already sold out to corporations, but you know what I mean. Another little piece that didn't make the news was the Million Man March in DC. I can't understand why no one reported on this at all. As a matter of fact, the one little report I saw was mentioned, several thousand people. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's more than several thousand people. I could be wrong, but, maybe I have to pull off my shoes and try counting them that way. Now, one of the little pieces that came out, I'm missing a slide here. Hold on, just let me see. A slide went missing. Sorry, guys. I'll just have to talk you through it. one of the little pieces that came out this week, Zero Hedge and several other writers, there's an organization that's just recently been in the news a hell of a lot that has been speaking out against the TPP a lot, like hugely, and that would be Doctors Without Borders. And the question that's being asked on Zero Hedge and several alternative media sites is, did the US bomb Doctors Without Borders because of their very vocal and public stance about the Trans-Pacific trade? Gotta wonder. They've just recently come out with, first of all, the US has said it was a mistake. Yeah, US commander of the international forces in Afghanistan has said the airstrike on the hospital in northern city of Kunduz was a mistake. It's kind of like that court case I heard of that one time where the guy was brought up on charges of assault and he said to the judge, "No, judge, I didn't punch him. He just ran into my fist 10 times. That's right. The US didn't deliberately blow up a hospital in Afghanistan. They just bombed it multiple times by accident, because it happens. Needless to say, MSF, the Doctors Without Borders, has called for an independent international inquiry into the Kunduz attack. The charity said that statements from the Afghan government implied that the hospital had been deliberately targeted and it amounted to an admission of war crimes. Oh, yeah, that war crime word getting tossed around again. Yes, so we're going to get into the Middle East stuff now, because we have a lot to talk about over there. I put out an article earlier this week that is, in my mind, one of the most important pieces for people to understand. If you're trying to explain to people what's going on about the whole Syria thing. As I said in the article, it's called Before and After, a Picture of Opposites. As history has changed on a daily basis and propaganda seems to wipe clean people's memories when it comes to the past, sometimes we need to really look at what is being rewritten and why. What I posted on Removing the Shackles was an article written by Vogue magazine, one of the biggest publications out there, that was a story about a rose in the desert, Asma al-Assad, Lady Diana of the Middle East. And this was a very long article. The reporter was sent to Syria to meet with Osama al-Assad, Bashar Assad's wife, the First Lady of Syria. And this article writes a glowing story of not only her as a woman and what she has been doing for the country, who she is, what her background is, and how she's been working within the country to make huge changes, but also gives you kind of an interesting look at Bashar Assad as well as a leader of a country. And just before this went, or sorry, I should say, just after this went to print, it got pulled. Because it was just after this was printed in 2011 that all of a sudden the US decided to start Arab Spring. Because let's face it, we all know they started it. It's a proven fact. To oust Assad out of power. So this article was wiped out of existence. There's a couple of copies, and I managed to find a copy of it. This is a really important article for people. If if you're trying to help your family and friends to understand what Syria was pre-propaganda, this is the article to read. And then read the articles that were written a year later about the same woman that literally demonizes her and makes out that she is does nothing but spend all of the money of the people on jewels and fancy carpets. Yet the Vogue article very clearly outlines that that's not even remotely the kind of person she is. So we'll start there. So what's going on in Syria? Oh, well, it's been kind of a shit show. It's been kind of a circus, actually. And I hate to say it, I've actually spent a good portion of the week laughing my ass off at how completely idiotic the American government and the Pentagon looks right now, because they just keep talking and no one's buying it. And if they are, they've been drinking too much Kool-Aid. So, in 1 week, Russian jets destroy ISIS headquarters, tanks, munition depots, fuel dumps, training grounds, you name it. It's been a tough week for terrorists in Syria. Over 7 days, Russia's delivered over 100 airstrikes at various jihadist facilities across the country, reportedly igniting panic among some groups. And of course, last week on Transpicuous News, we talked about the fact that it's already been proven that when the Americans started screaming, the Russians blew up civilians, they've killed all of those civilians, were all killed and all that, it was all bullshit and lies, proven by the fact that the reports came out before the Russian jets had even left the ground. Hell, the first report of the civilian casualties of Russian airstrikes happened before Russian parliament had even finished voting. Okay. So, and yet, US media and the US propaganda spinners and the spin doctors are still trying to push that. Oh, casualties, huge casualties. Well, they kind of got kicked in the teeth this week on that one. So let's see. NATO warned Russia on the airstrikes. NATO put a very stern message out to Russia. You stand down. You're being very naughty, and we're not going to put up with it. And then did nothing because they can't. So then the interesting happened on October 7th. And when I read this, I laughed so hard because it's like, okay, now the Russians are just showing off. 4 Russian warships launched 26 missiles against ISIS. The warships were in the Caspian Sea. They were here, the Caspian Sea. They fired missiles that flew over Iran, over Iraq, and hit all the targets in Syria 1,500 kilometers away. And they hit every target. Which, like I said, I mean, now they're just showing off. I mean, that was just like showboating there. And of course, immediately, CNN, the first to break the news that US unnamed officials have said that Russian missiles that were heading for Syria, 4 of them landed in Iran and blew up people. Of course, only CNN and BBC both tried to run this with their unnamed US official sources telling them this, except that, yeah, basically, sorry guys, Iran, Syria, Iraq, Russia all went, what missiles crashed in Iran? Pictures, or it didn't happen, because it didn't happen. So, again, more of that information propaganda, straight off lies. Let's call it what it is. It's just straight up bullshit lies. This was interesting, and strangely enough, not covered by the Western media at all. This is a translation out of French media. Air duel between the Sukhoi Su-30 Russian jets and Israeli F-15s. Oh, F-15s, the ones they got from the States. 6 Russian fighter jets have intercepted 4 Israeli McDonnell Douglas F-15 fighter bombers attempting to infiltrate the Syrian coast. The Israeli warplanes have been flying over the Syrian airspace for months, and in particular the coast of Latakia. I can't say that, sorry guys. Which is now the bridgehead of the Russian forces in Syria. So basically, yeah, the Israeli jets came flying over and the Russian jets went up and said, I think you guys should just fuck right off. And they did. But of course, the Israelis are complaining bitterly. How dare the Russians face down their jets? You know, when they were in Israeli airspace, uninvited, no permission with their military, but Russia was. Now, this is interesting because the group that the US keeps using to base all their Syrian on-the-ground information is the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which we have already proven over and over again are a bunch of American stooges. They literally are running the American propaganda machine over there. Well, this week, the man who runs the SOHR admitted to Russia Today that he hasn't visited Syria in 15 years. But he can absolutely vouch for all his reporters he has on the ground. Right. And if that wasn't bad enough, this is the one that's the nail in the coffin. Because, of course, the big claim the American government keeps making that Obama has been whining about is that the Russian jets are bombing the opposing forces to those who are trying to oust Assad. So basically, it's like you've got, here's Assad's, you know, his military, and you had those forces that the Americans, the opposition to Assad, that the Americans, you know, paid for, put in place, you know, Arab Spring, all of that good stuff. And Obama's complaint is that the Russians are bombing the oppositions that they paid for and trained, the moderates, to go against Assad because he's protecting Assad. Well, that might have worked, except that the Syrian opposition leader admits that the Russian attacks are targeting only terrorists. It's been reported that the Syrian rebels are ready to unite with the official army of the country to show resistance to the Islamist militants. According to Sputnik news agency, the leader of the Syrian opposition has said that the so-called Free Syrian Army, that's the guys the US set up, was not a terrorist group and was therefore ready to join the forces of Bashar Assad to oppose the Islamic State and the al-Nusra. Oh wait, this is the guy who the US is saying the Russians are bombing, but the same guy has just come out and said that the Russians are just bombing terrorists and that they're going to join up with Assad to fight the terrorists themselves. I don't know about you, but I think someone just figured out that they've been had, and the best way to fix this problem is to go with the guy with the bigger club, which in this instance is Russia, and now the opposition against Assad is going to join with Assad to fight off the terrorists, because yeah, terrorists don't have a shred of hope in hell. I do love the fact that they keep talking about the US CIA trained terrorists. You know, that was the thing they refused to admit to back in July, but now it's like all over the news. So with anything with the news, with this kind of stuff, you just have to wait a couple of months for the real truth to start coming in. And Obama has now made several statements. I posted 2 video clips on Facebook. One of them is 1.5 minutes. The other one is 2 minutes long. His statements have gotten to the point of ludicrousy that are so completely asinine that I posted the one out this morning and I said, really, every American should be insulted, absolutely insulted right now, that he thinks you're so fucking stupid that you will actually buy this bullshit. The basic premise is, you see, is Russia is a very weak nation. And that's why, you know, weak nations invade other nations. Oh, and also that Russia has no allies. No, Syria is their only ally, and maybe Iran sometimes. They're Russia's only allies. Yeah, because you know, all those people who are in the Eurasian Economic Union and China and India, Pakistan, most of Southeast Asia. Did I mention China? Oh, and Venezuela, and Brazil, and Guatemala. Right. But apparently they don't count because Russia's only ally is Syria, because they're a weak nation. And I said, like I said, you expect politicians to lie because, I mean, that's what they do. But I was just going to make a very, very crude joke, but I'm not going to. I'll restrain myself. But you at least expect them to put some effort into making the lie look somewhat believable. Like, quite frankly, I mean, these ones this week are just insulting, completely insulting to anyone's intelligence. And like I said, some of the articles that have come out, because the spin doctoring going on out of Washington right now, you really should read it for comedic value. It is quite a giggle. I kid you not, this really happened. According to a report from the Daily Beast, a top State Department official speaking to a group of Syrian Americans in a private meeting Monday said the U.S. policy is working because Russians wouldn't have to have helped Assad if we hadn't weakened him. Russian intervention is a sign of success for the American policy on Syria. Oh, yeah, it's a sign, because it took them 4.5 years to push Assad so hard that nothing happened. And the Russians just finally got sick and tired of the game and came in and cleaned up. Yeah, that's what it was. Oh, now, also this week, oh, so quietly as well, Pentagon funding bill was on Obama's desk. Now, this is good because this is October 8th. $600 million to fund the Syrian rebels. Okay, that's on top of the $500 million they've already spent to train those 50 guys that, who all disappeared into the desert, except for the 9 that are still fighting ISIS, whatever. Oh, and $300 million is going to Kiev to support the rebels there. That's exactly like what's playing out in Syria is what's playing out in the Ukraine. Like, exactly. Lockstep, same template. All they did was cross out name Syria, Arab Spring, and put in Ukraine and put in Maiden. That's it. It's the exact same. So, yeah, so they go through and they announce they're going to spend all this money. And the very next day, another article comes out. Obama administration ends efforts to train Syrians to combat ISIS. The Obama administration on Friday abandoned its effort to build up a new rebel force inside Syria to combat the Islamic State, acknowledging the failure of its $500 million campaign to train thousands of fighters, all 50 of them. Yeah. And that it will instead use the money to provide ammunition and some weapons for groups already engaged in battle. Of course, our question is, which groups would those be? Because the opposition groups are kind of sort of joining up with Assad. So I'm pretty sure he's not going to give them weapons. Is he talking about the Al-Nusra guys and the Al-Qaeda guys and the ISIS guys? Because pretty much once the opposition group merges with Assad, the only other ones out there fighting against anyone is Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, who are all American. It's been an interesting week. Now, Saudi had some interesting shit this week, like the fact that Saudi has just replenished the Syrian rebels with the most effective weapons against the Assad regime. A Saudi Arabian official has reportedly disclosed that the Sunni kingdom was Wahhabism. not Sunni, has sent Syrian rebels a new batch of one of the most effective weapons for battling against the Assad regime this week. It is an anti-tank, big-ass boom gun, big-ass thing. Here's interesting. The delivery of the TOW missiles, which has been provided by the CIA, will increase the capabilities of the FSA against Syrian armor. And it would enable them to more effectively battle against Assad's recent military advances. Oh, his recent military advances, right. On Thursday, the FSA and other affiliated rebel units carried out a tank massacre after the Syrian government launched a large offensive backed by the Russian airstrikes to retake northern portions of the Hama province. That's the part of the province that they were trying to explain to everyone last Tuesday. There's no rebels there. There's no rebels there. Why are you firing on those areas? The other one is, interesting piece of news, Saudi Arabia is continuing a hiring spree of American lobbyists and public relation experts. Apparently, they're having a little bit of a problem with their image in America, and they've had to hire like some of the most expensive lobbyists and public relation experts to try and spruce up their image a bit, make them a bit more acceptable, more funky, get down for the American public to swallow. I don't know. They're also still buying up massive amounts of weapons, and like I said last week, wait a second. This is the country that this spring, for the first time ever, had to sell off bonds because they're losing money kind of big time over the whole oil thing at the moment. And yet they're still spending massive amounts of money on buying weapons and American lobbyists and PR firms. Oh, and we still have not got confirmation about whether Salman is in hospital or not. Things on that front have been absolutely silent for the last 5 days. So we're waiting to see. Now, one of the other interesting things that happened this week, 2 little ones. U.S. pulls its aircraft carrier out of the Persian Gulf as the Russian ships enter from the Caspian as they came down. The United States has pulled the USS Theodore Roosevelt, a massive nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, out of the Persian Gulf as Russian warships entered the arena. This will be the first time since 2007 the U.S. Navy will have no aircraft carriers in the Gulf. Very interesting. U.S. starts to pull their Patriot missiles from Turkey. That was this week. And we're going to get into this in just a second because this is really important. It's very interesting, pulling their ships out. One might wonder what's going on. Now, we need to talk about Turkey. Hold on, guys. Is my computer plugged in? I hope so. We'll find out. We need to talk about Turkey. Massive blast in Ankara at a peace rally this week. The largest terrorist explosion bombing in Turkey to have happened in a long, long time. The initial reports gave it at least 30 people killed. The number's way over the hundreds now. In July, at least 30 people were killed and over 100 injured in an explosion that struck a cultural center of the town in July, remember, keep this in mind, down near the Syrian borders in what the authorities called a terrorist attack. According to local media, the explosions took place near Ankara Central, a railway station. There were at least 2 bombs, high-powered. As of this morning, which was about just before noon, my time, there was up to 128 people confirmed dead, although they still have, I think, like 9 or 10 people still missing and unaccounted for, they have not been identified yet. And the big announcement this morning, just before noon, is that the Turkish government is now telling everyone that this may have, strongly suggesting that this was an Islamic State terrorist attack. We need to talk about this. There's been no official confirmation of the casualty count. There's been no official confirmation by the government of Turkey of how many dead there are in this latest attack this week. They're still making this big thing. All the elections coming up, we're going to be doing that. And the airstrikes, which they started up again, come a day after the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, declared a state of inactivity, promising to halt all attacks ahead of Turkey's elections in November. So as soon as that was announced, that the PKK was going to stop all strikes back against Turkish government, the Turkish government came in with an airstrike and razed a whole pile of basic grounds. Now, here's the thing. We have a lot of reports coming in. Basically, limited internet in Turkey, the fact that Twitter was taken down. A link to the bombing has not been confirmed, but the Turkish Prime Minister ordered a temporary publication ban in the aftermath of the bombing, banning media reporting across the country. After that, yesterday, there was a massive peace rally in Ankara with people carrying signs, "The state is a killer, we know the murderers," allegations of the state's responsibility made the aftermath of the attack, but has been denied by the government. It's more pictures of it. The people are pissed in Turkey. So let's take a look at this. We're going to go back in time and we'll give you a little background to this. Let's go back to June. Federal elections in Turkey. The ruling party, Erdogan, loses his majority as the pro-Kurdish HDP gains seats. Basically, Erdogan has had a walk in the park for, I think it's like 13 years. 13 years. He's had run within a majority government. This election in June, he lost his majority seating, which meant he had to form a coalition government with the HDP, which is mostly Kurdish officials. Now, I'm going to read you just a couple paragraphs because this is really important. Mainstream media out of London, England, when this happened back on June 7th. Turkey's President Erdogan has suffered the biggest setback in 13 years of amassing power as voters denied his ruling party a parliamentary majority for the first time since 2002 and gave the country's large Kurdish minority its biggest voice ever in national policies. The election result on Sunday, with an almost all votes counted, appeared to wreck Erdogan's ambition to rewrite the constitution to establish himself as an all-powerful executive president. The Kurdish vote in particular swinging the election against the incumbents on an unprecedented scale. The 10% hurdle, dating from the military authorized constitution of 1980, had been intended to diminish the Kurdish people. So now we need to take a little look. Because we always say, we all seem to be having a hard time remembering what the basic facts are. And when the media is glossing over and propagandizing, we lose track of exactly what's happened. Let's face it, the last 4 months has been pretty fucking busy for most of us. Let's take a look. Turkey, from June until today. Okay, so the national election was held in June 7th of 2015. Erdogan loses the majority government and has to form a coalition with the People's Democratic Party, which is mostly Kurdish. Within weeks, there is a terrorist attack, which we read about just a second ago, that is blamed on the PKK Kurdish militants. Now remember, the PKK was classified by Turkey as a terrorist organization. They are a Kurdish militia, and that's what they call it. They call themselves a militia. Turkey restarts the war with the PKK after several months of a ceasefire and begins airstrikes against the PKK camps in Iraq and Syria. This would be the same PKK militia fighting with the Peshmerga Kurdish troops who are fighting with the USA with their support and weapons in fighting ISIS. Over the course of 3 months, multiple bombings of PKK, purportedly, in Syria and Iraq and in Turkey, plus multiple terrorist attacks in retaliation by the Kurds. The Turkish police stand by, this was in August, Turkish police stand by and allow a crowd to attack and destroy the offices of several members of the elected People's Democratic Party. Raze them to the ground. All Kurdish. In September, Erdogan announces a snap election because he was unable to form a coalition government. Gee, I wonder why. Pay attention. Last week, the Turkish forces put a Kurdish town inside Turkey on curfew and then rolled into town and began systematic attacks with tanks and mortars. The final death count has not been released by the government whatsoever. There is no idea of how many people died in that town. It was a Kurdish town in Turkey. This week, massive explosion during the peace rally kills at least 128 people. The government shuts down media, internet, social media, and refuses to allow access to the site and is now claiming that it's ISIS. Yesterday, the US removed its missiles from Turkey. Now this we reported on back in August. This isn't a shock. This isn't a sudden move. Germany and the US on the exact same day back in August said they were removing their missile arrangements from Turkey this month. And all of a sudden, we have all this shit happening in Turkey. Biggie, am I live still? Because it's saying my internet connection is unstable.
You're still live.
Awesome. Okay, we'll keep going, folks. So, do you see what's going on? He's created this lovely war within Turkey. The situation in Turkey is now literally desperate. For not just the Kurdish people, but for the Turkish people as well. This is literally turned in almost to a war state. Why? Because he refused to form a coalition government with the Kurds. And now there's a snap election in 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I think, in which he's hoping to win the majority so he can take his seats back. Is that just to give him a little extra time to make sure that the election is rigged? This is serious stuff. Now, why? Why? Because the one thing I've been kind of saying for a while is you got to keep your eye on Turkey. Now, last week I put together, last Saturday, so just over a week ago, I put together a really, really long article called The Islamic Extremism, History of Wahhabism and the Royal Saudi Family. This is a vitally important article. Yes, it's long. Yes, it's kind of dry reading. But they explain, or I go through, the reason why you need to pay attention to Turkey. Modern Turkey is a secret Zionist state controlled by the Donma. Now, who are the Donma? And there is a vast history about the Donma. But yes, The information, all the research I did points out very, very clearly that modern Turkey is completely a Zionist state. Does that make things a little more clear? Did for me when I figured that out. Turkey is one to watch because Turkey sits in a very interesting position, not just geographically, but politically as well. So, being part of NATO is real. Things in Gaza have gotten really, really bad. Again, very interesting the timing, right after Israel discovers more oil on the Golan Heights, in the Palestinian-owned lands. We've got multiple attacks going on. And yeah, there have been Palestinian attacks against the Israelis. Things like, stabbings, people throwing rocks. There was a car bomb, I think yesterday or the day before. And in return, they get mortared with missiles from Israel. Watch Israel, because there's a lot of shit going on there. And we're about to see a resurgence of what happened in the summer of 2014 play out again on Gaza. Keep your eyes peeled. Now, what was really interesting today is just a few hours before, Iraqi Air Forces announced that they hit the convoy of the ISIS leader al-Baghdadi. Now, I went and I cross-referenced it, and I got some feeds out of one of the Arabic newspapers. It says they hit the convoy, and there is a picture or a report saying that they saw Baghdadi being carried to a vehicle, but there's no updates as to what his condition is, if he's hurt, if he's alive, if he's dead. But again, really interesting timing by the Iraqi Air Force. Very interesting indeed. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff becoming really, really transparent right now. If you know how to look and read between the lines and see and remember, most importantly, remember what happened previously and join the dots connect together. There's a lot of shit coming out right now that's making stuff very, very transparent. Just got to find it, and you got to recognize it for what it is. This is my new favorite meme. I'm plugging this all over the place. Kind of like my secondary take on, this one. Anyways, my friends, that is the end of Transpicuous News for this week. Tomorrow night, we're going to have some interesting conversations on the round table. We have a guest coming on. We've got some interesting thoughts about how we move forward as sovereign beings. And I've had some interesting conversations this week with some really interesting people. And there's a lot of people out there who are seriously moving and shaking. And I think if you put your feet on the ground, you might be able to feel the rumble of it starting to build. My last thing I want to talk about tonight is put a call out. Fundraising time. We need funds for CCN to keep CCN going. It's the end of the month, or almost. And yeah, guess what? There's no funds for next month, as usual. So please, if you can, donate to CCN to help us keep us live on the air. And if you can't donate, take the time and spread the word. Spread the link out. I posted on Removing the Shackles, the new fundraising video for 2016. Share it out. Spend 3 minutes. A little energy. And that's it for me, folks. I will see you tomorrow night on the round table and next Sunday on Transpicuous News. Bye, guys.
Transpicuous News, connecting the dots between the lines.